Hello, my fellow meme consumers. I have just seen Blade Runner, the final cut, directed by Ridley Scott, and I really am gonna have trouble explaining my thoughts on this film. I liked it, I can say that much, but there are also several things in this film that I did not like and did not enjoy, but the things that I did like were so good that they overweighted things I didn't like. I didn't hate any aspect of this film. There are just some things that didn't really fit. That just kind of felt like, oh, this is the 80s, so this is where this would be if this was the 80s. And it kind of takes me out of the whole, oh, this is the future thing. Because there are some parts of it that feel very much like the 80s to me. There is I can't remember the genetic designer. I don't remember what his character's name is, but the one who plays chess with Tyrell, he has like these little dolls, and it makes sense for the dolls to be there, but the way they're designed doesn't really fit with the scheme and the aesthetic of this film. And there are some scenes that don't really feel like they need to be there. Overall, I did like this film. I like the aesthetic of this film most of all. It's got this I know it's like a neo-noir film, and it kind of helped start that genre, but to me, the music and the visuals are the big selling points of this film. Like the way it looks from a cinematography standpoint and the way it sounds through the score is just incredible. Like the mood and the aesthetic that it gives you from those two things combined is infinitely enjoyable in my opinion. I really like the score and the look of this film, and those really are the two highest points. The writing, like the story, even though this is based on like one of the most famous novels of the 20th century, To Android Shooting for Electric Sheep, which I haven't read, like my whole knowledge of that. I had an English class where we learned about Philip K. Dick, and we read one of his short stories, but I can't remember which one. I'm pretty sure it was like one where a guy was on another planet, comes back to Earth, and there's like robots that took over, or something like that. I can't remember, but I got like the sense of what he was going for. But I'm not sure if that's what this film is going for. This film is going for a very moody, emotional film. Despite none of the characters really showing too much emotion, despite it being about robots, there's just a sense of euphoria almost, even though most of the characters are very unhappy throughout the film and kind of down. They just kind of like take joy in this kind of dystopian world, which it shouldn't work. And that's like why the story doesn't really work. The story is interesting in parts, like Rutger Hauer's character in theory is cool, but like they set up like, oh, why would he want to do what he does? And it's like, oh, this is a detective film, so we're gonna find out. But then you just kind of, and it's not like lazy the way they do it, but it would have been interesting if this was like Harrison Ford trying to find out, but then Harrison Ford kind of goes on his own thing with the replicant character I can't remember these people's names, I'm sorry. I don't remember characters' names too well. But the love interest that he has, and like that whole thing which the film focuses on a lot. I know that's like a negative for a lot of people, but it didn't really bother me. I don't know, maybe the music, like I said, like it just kind of sells the movie for me, even the parts I don't like. And the only parts I don't like, it's kind of just the universe is hard to sell for me at points. Sometimes it's really, really, really good, but sometimes it's like it tries to do these little details to make the world feel bigger, and they don't work. There's just a bunch of like these like little people that like attack his car, and they felt like discount Jawas or something. It didn't really fit in this universe, and there are times you can tell like, oh, they just dressed up a city street to look like the future. Most of the time, it definitely works really well, especially for the time. This was an amazing accomplishment. When you watch something like Star Wars, like you never get the sense that this takes place on Earth, even though, you know, obviously all of it does. But with this film, I do get that sense a lot of the time. It doesn't bother me, it just kind of takes me out of it for just a little bit. It's only like one or two scenes, but considering that's like one of the big points for the film is and I included that with cinematography, like just the look, the design of the film. It's just a few times where it didn't work as well. And like I said with the puppets, it's just some of these things that just like, they don't fit, in my opinion. And I feel like all of the issues I have with this film, I feel like were addressed in the sequel, which is a lot better in my opinion. it goes for a very different mood, because this is, like I said, more euphoria, whereas with 2049 it's more almost like gloomy and very atmospheric and dark, especially with the music. Like if you compare the opening scene of this film to the opening scene of 2049, it's very, like with this it's got like the very warm, like atmospheric sense, whereas the new one's like drony and loud and like abrasive, and they're going for very different things, I would say. I prefer what the original Blade Runner gave us, but it didn't give it to me as well as I would have liked. It's hard to talk about, like, because it's very simple what this film does. Like, it's just, oh, the blue, moody colors, the warm synth music, the design of the place. But it's kind of hard to say why it doesn't work as well as I'd like it to. I haven't really talked too much about plot, because plot, for me, doesn't matter too much in film. Unless you have a really dumb and horrible plot. To me, it's more about presentation. Because most stories at this point are just retellings of old stories. And with this one, it's very, much a retelling of noir films, but in its own new way. It's all about the presentation, in my opinion. And the presentation is great, but it's not always great. And sometimes the plot does, I know this is going to sound strange, but it does get in the way of the presentation. Like with some of the stuff, it's like, I don't care too much about this. I am much more forgiving than some critics of the film, I would say, because I do enjoy this. But there's just some things that's like, I can't get behind that, really. I don't think, because 2049, like I said, did its own thing, so I feel like there's still a great Blade Runner film yet to be made that's like the original, because the new one took its own route, and I like it for what it is, and I really like it. But for this film, the euphoria of that, some films have like striven for that, I would say, but I'm still, there have been like 5 cuts of the films. Maybe we'll get a cut someday that's like the perfect film, but I doubt it. As far as like, I know like the whole is Derek a replicant thing is like a big deal. I mean, pretty much in the final cut you have to think he is, because like with the unicorn thing, it's like, oh yeah, he is a replicant. At that point, it's not, there's not much room for interpretation then, I would say. But like I said, like that's not really interesting to me. It's just kind of the mood and the presentation of it. The themes in this film are interesting, but I don't care too much about themes in film, I would say. Sometimes I don't give points, like take points off for bad themes, but sometimes I will give points for good themes, I would say. Like there are some films that just the idea is presented, and this also applies for like literature and music and all mediums. Like sometimes what they're saying is important, but sometimes I don't care too much, and it's just about the experience. And this is very much an experience film for me, and an experience I'd recommend highly. I would definitely say, like, don't expect a perfect film, but expect a very inspirational and great, flawed film. And on that note, I'm going to give Blade Runner, the final cut, in this case, a B. And yeah, hope you enjoyed my rambling here. This felt a lot more, because it's just hard to talk about this film, like, comparatively. I know I say that about a lot of films, but a lot of the films I watch are typically films considered to be, like, controversial, I would say. And I usually know immediately, like, oh, this is how I feel about a film. But with this one, and the film I'm going to be reviewing next, A Clockwork Orange, it's really hard to pinpoint how I feel. So, yeah. Bye, I guess.